and they're all over the place. So I know we're going to talk about that even more with some of the big names that really moved around the league this year, like a Durant. But Justin, as an end result of Kawhi going to the Clippers and not going to the Lakers, how do you feel if you're a Lakers fan or if you're LeBron James and AD? How do you feel about how Kawhi's moves all went down?
Well, we kind of talked about this offline, but I felt like the Lakers screwed the situation up when they didn't get a commitment from Kawhi right away with all the big names that were out there. And the Lakers worked so hard to get that max spot available. And then they just sat around and they waited for Kawhi when there was multiple guards that were out there that they could have had and probably had cheaper than Kawhi. And they missed on all of them, and they missed on everybody waiting for Kawhi. And you start looking at that team and going, okay, how does Kawhi and LeBron and AD and Kuzma, how do they all fit on the same team really anyways? That's just an odd lineup to have out there. It's a bunch of big guys. It's a bunch of guys that typically play forward. You know, what are you going to do when you run into teams with multiple guards? Yeah, you'll have an advantage on the offensive side, but you're going to get worn out on the defensive side when you're chasing around a Dame Lillard and a McCollum or a Steph Curry and a Klay Thompson and now D'Angelo Russell. I felt like, Eric, they should have went in a different direction. They should have made a move for Kemba or Russell or they should have, once they couldn't get Kawhi to commit and he was like, I'm going to take my time. Like at that point, you're on the clock with LeBron now. Like this isn't 27-year-old LeBron. You're at a point where you've got maybe like 2 peak years of LeBron left. So you've got to go out and get talent around him. You can't wait for a guy like Kawhi that all year, Eric, had been rumored to be going to the Clippers. That was the thing that bugged me, was like all year it was like Kawhi's definitely going to the Clippers. And then once the Raptors had some success and it looked like they were going to the finals and then they ultimately won the final, it was like, well, maybe he stays in Toronto. He wants to defend his title. But the Lakers then kind of crept into it like, well, they want a meeting. He wants to meet with Magic. But all along, it just seemed like maybe he was just toying with the Lakers. And maybe it goes back to 2 years ago when he was a Spur and he wanted the Lakers to trade for him because that came out of that whole Magic Johnson sort of leak of some of the questions that Kawhi was asking of Magic. And one of them was, how big of a push did the Lakers make to really get me when I was in San Antonio? So the same thing maybe applies to Paul George, where he was the same way. He came out in Indy, 1 year left on his deal, said, I'm not going to re-sign here. I'd prefer to be traded. I want the team to know upfront what's going on. And he wanted to be a Laker. And the Lakers did nothing. They thought they could just get him. And the Thunder swooped in, made the deal, and then wooed him. And then ultimately, both Kawhi and Paul George end up on the Clippers. So the Lakers have made some mistakes here. They went all in on AD, so they had used all their assets, it seems like, unless they're going to make a move and trade Kuzma, and I don't know what they have left to trade. But it seemed like they had the max spot. They just should have went after somebody that was attainable, not a guy that they really weren't in the mix for all year. And there's been a lot of rumors that even we hear that have been out there of LeBron and Kawhi. There may be some kind of rivalry there with Kawhi, and he wants to see himself as the top guy. And even back to those Spurs titles and those finals versus the Heat when LeBron was there, that maybe they weren't ever going to be a fit and they didn't really have much of a relationship. And then even the whole thing of LeBron saying he was going to step back. Eric, I don't know how you felt when you heard that, but I just can't see LeBron as a guy that's going to be deferring at the end of big games and playoff games, just getting the ball out of his hand all the time. Look, we talk about LeBron not taking shots maybe at the end of games or something like that, trying, quote unquote, to make the best basketball play. But to just think for 2 and 3 minute stretches, he's just going to take a back seat. I can't see him doing that. And I couldn't see Kawhi believing that either.
It's hard to say at this point in his career. I think, I definitely see what you're saying, but I think LeBron has to know that if you're bringing in an AD or recruiting a Kawhi, that you're going to take 33% of the shots because 33% got to go the other two directions each. So I don't know if that would have been a problem or not. And
do you think they should have waited around though for Kawhi?
No,
ultimately.
No, I totally agree with what you're saying, that I think they made their bed and they were committed to it. And they really sold out on this idea that Kawhi wanted the purple and gold so bad that they felt like they were in the catbird seat, and ultimately they weren't. And I think there could be something to the ego play that you're talking about, especially with PG in the mix. I think there could be something to that. I know I was big all along on saying that Kawhi was never going to sign with Toronto. He was never going to sign a max deal, 4 to 5 years, and stay in Canada. I just never believed that that was in play for him. So I wasn't worried about Toronto. And when it came down to late last week, when it seemed like the Lakers were in the lead, I felt pretty good as far as a LeBron fan that this was going to be a super team. Again, I was surprised by the Clipper thing, but some of it, as you look in hindsight as 2020, it does start to make a little bit of sense that if Kawhi said, well, I've always wanted to be in purple and gold, but they kind of scorned me a couple of years ago. And I also don't want to play behind LeBron. If some of those things were in the back of his mind, the Clippers were right there in the same city, and they were a willing participant in getting him and making him the man, the 1A, the alpha dog. And so, yeah, you're not in purple and gold, but you're still in the city that you want to be. And maybe his kind of new direction isn't becoming a Laker hero, but maybe he brings the Clippers a title or 2 or 3 as he closes out his career over the next decade, which I think is a real possibility. I think the parity in the league that we'll talk about here in segment 2 brings the Clippers into a realistic chance to be a Western Conference finalist and go to the NBA finals. I really do at this point, because Kawhi is top 3 in the league as a player. So yeah, I think the Lakers messed up. I really do, because I like what you say. I like that, if you're going to, because we knew when they started shipping guys, I mean, they shipped 4 jerseys out to Washington. They cleared a whole bunch of space. It looked like for a while there was only about 4.5 guys on their roster. And it's like, okay, who's going to play for the Lakers if they don't get Kawhi? Or really, if they do get Kawhi, how are they going to fill out the roster? They got to have veteran minimums the rest of the way through. But once he started hemming and hawing and dragging his feet, and I'm going to meet with Toronto, I'm going to meet with, no. You can't let D'Angelo, we'll talk about this again in segment 2. You can't let D'Angelo Russell slip away. You can't let Kemba Walker slip away. You can't let this happen and walk away with nothing. It just continues to be, I think, the last 2 to 3 years with not only Magic Johnson and Jeannie Buss, but Rob Pelinka, just some swings and misses out of that franchise that aren't helping LeBron close with a couple of titles, as I'm sure he wanted to when he signed up for his final curtain call in LA.
And I also think, though, Eric, they went out and obviously they had a contingency plan, and it was going to be to sign a bunch of those older guys. So as soon as Kawhi, that Saturday morning that started coming out of where he was going, then it was, okay, 2 years and $30 million to Danny Green. And then
they were immediate, right?
$8 million a year to Contavious Caldwell-Pope. And then Later this week, it was Avery Bradley signing there, and then JaVale McGee and DeMarcus Cousins and Quinn Cook. It was all these other names. At what point do you think Anthony Davis went, hey, can I have that $4 million back?
Oh, I'm sure he did. He probably said to LeBron, okay, on Space Jam 2, you're now paying me double, because not only do you have to make up the $4 million, but now I'm pissed that we didn't get Kawhi, so you owe me double.
Yeah. JaVale McGee got your $4 million, AD. So congratulations on that. Maybe that's a little bit of karma for turning down $4 million. But Eric, from a Clippers side of this, like you said, I think they have a tremendous roster with what they've built. They re-signed Beverly. They've got Lou Williams on maybe the best contract in the NBA when you see what these other guys are making, and he's sitting there at $8 million. I couldn't believe when he signed that deal a few years ago for them, and that's a great deal. They got Montrezl Harrell. They've got a bunch of pieces on that team, and now you add in 2 superstars there. The Warriors aren't what they were. You kept the Lakers from getting that third star and becoming the next super team. So, yeah, I agree with you. I think they right now, I mean, and Vegas has them at the favorite. The problem is the news that broke yesterday, being on Wednesday of this week, is that Kawhi Leonard did not sign a 4-year deal. He signed what will turn out to be probably a 2-year deal, which lines up with what Paul George was. On paper, it'll say 3 years, but it's really a 2-year deal with a 1-year player option. And what we've seen is these guys in their younger, low 30s, they're signing again. So the CBA going to get a contract, new TV contract. Cap's going to go up. It's going to be more money for these guys. I think they'll be at 10 years plus in the league. That kicks them into a different category. So the Clippers in reality have 2 years to make this work. They have 2 years to put a team around these two guys, get them into a championship run, and to make them want to stay. If not, the Clippers are going to go through what everybody else has had to go through this year. in the fact that these two guys are going to be free agents. And then who knows who either they're talking to or who's talking to them on different teams. And the Clippers could be left with no one. And oh, by the way, they sent every pick they've had, I think, for the next 15 years to the Oklahoma City Thunder to get Paul George. So they are going to be absolutely screwed if this doesn't work out for them, because not only will they not have a title in the next 2 years, they don't have a future either. Now, the only good thing for them is the Lakers don't have any either, because they did the same thing with Anthony Davis. But again, Eric, we talk about these guys signing these short-term deals and what they mean. Well, now you know that it's at least probably a max for 2 years for these guys. And if this doesn't go right, it could be even shorter than that. So that's the one interesting piece I thought come out, because everybody was like, oh, it's going to be a 4-year max deal. Turns out it's really not. Kawhi lined his deal up with Paul George, and there's no question in my mind that was not a coincidence.
So really quick question, before we move on in segment one, talk about some of this other stuff with OKC. Do you feel like either Kawhi or Paul George finish out their career in a Clippers uniform?
Oh, I would never bet on that right now. I don't see how there's any player in the league outside of maybe a Steph Curry and Clay that you could bet on that are going to finish their careers with their team. There seems to be no loyalty in the NBA at this point. And it's both sides. It's not just the players. It's the teams too. They will dump guys and move guys around. It's short contracts. Everybody's after expiring. Everybody wants to get younger, get picks, move players around. So just from the standpoint of how both of them are just willing at any moment to make a move, I don't see how you could think that at this point. And plus, Kawhi is such a weird guy. You don't really know what's going on. I mean, anybody that'll wear New Balance on a basketball court's kind of quirky anyways. So, I mean, his uncle's running things, but he's really not. And he's got this weird inner circle, and it's just strange. I don't see how the Clippers can. I think they probably feel good for this year, but then they've got to be concerned of like, okay, when does Kawhi ever pull another Spurs move? Is he going to be happy in LA? Is this really what he wants? Is this what Paul George wants? Can they make this work? I don't think anybody at this point knows. I don't think any NBA fan can feel good about a contract being signed anymore, because all of them seem to be movable by the team and the players can force their way out. I think the only contract in the league now that's immovable is John Wall. I think the Wizards are just stuck with him and Wizard fans, because nobody wants that deal because he can't even walk. But
well, Justin, I got to tell you, I thought Chris Paul was a guy that Houston was stuck with, but you got anything to say about that?
Wow. I mean, talk about what we talked there on the top of, we had no idea. We talked when we did kind of the first iteration of the show, the places we thought that Russell Westbrook could be a good fit. But I never thought the Oklahoma City Thunder would be willing to take back Chris Paul in this deal. So they must have some kind of plan down the road that they would trade Russell Westbrook to the Houston Rockets, take the Chris Paul contract back, but they do get 2 more first-round picks. They get 2 pick swaps out of this. But I was shocked by it. I started to hear some rumblings earlier in the day that maybe Houston was trying to get themselves involved, but it seemed like they were trying to work it out where it was going to be more of like a Capella, Gordon type, just throwing some contracts together and bring Russell Westbrook in with Chris Paul and James Harden and then Russ, and just try to make it work with 3 superstars. But I guess the rumors were true, Eric. They were out there that Chris Paul and James Harden were not getting along at all. And the organization kind of tried to come out and put the fire extinguisher on that story. But it turns out, I guess that was burning a little hotter than they wanted to lead on. I guess it's a little bit like the kitchen in the State Farm commercials there. James Harden burned down Chris Paul's kitchen and took care of him, got him out of town.
Well, one thing's for sure, as we worked our way, over text with the Paul George situation over the weekend, and we were thinking, okay, where does this leave the Thunder? What are they going to do with Russell Westbrook? We both agreed with the fact that the Thunder were in complete rebuild mode at this point. And so you're not going to keep a 31-year-old Russell Westbrook who's still got 4 years and I think $140 million on his deal, something like that. Because at that point, the writing was on the wall that the skies were falling in OKC. And Justin, I'm really, kind of looking back and thinking, wow, they've got to feel so burned in some ways, because in 2012, they go to the NBA Finals against the Miami Heat, who had just won a title the year before. And at that point, you're on top of the world, because you've got Durant, you've got obviously Westbrook, you've got pieces there that you're now making a title run. You're at the pinnacle of the NBA with a chance to win the NBA Finals. But after that, it all changed. And instead of making additional runs, it seems like each year